Adriana Valenti had learned how to live while tired. Not just the kind of tired that sleep could fix. This was deeper. It lived in her bones. It followed her from one shift to the next like a shadow that never stretched away from her feet. It was the quiet exhaustion of someone who once had big dreams and now counted tips to pay rent. Chicago had not been unkind to her. But it had not been generous either. Every morning at 6 a.m., Adriana unlocked the side door of Cafe Verona, the small Italian cafe tucked between a dry cleaner and a flower shop on a busy downtown street. The air inside always smelled like ground espresso and yesterday's sugar. She would switch on the lights, tie her dark hair into a neat ponytail, and start the machine that hissed like it was already annoyed to be awake. She moved quickly. She had to. Office workers began lining up by 6:30. They ordered lattes with oat milk, cappuccinos with extra foam, Americanos with no room. Some were polite. Some were distracted. Most barely looked at her face. She smiled anyway. "Good morning," she would say. The words felt automatic. By noon she would wipe down the counter, count her tips and rush to the bus. There was no time to rest. No time to sit and dream about the life she once imagined. Because Adriana had not come to Chicago just to steam milk and pour coffee. She had studied literature. She had spent 4 years reading poetry in both English and Italian. Her grandparents were from Naples, and her Nana Rosa had whispered Neapolitan lullabies to her when she was small. Adriana grew up believing language was sacred. She wanted to become a literary translator. She wanted to bring Neapolitan poetry to American readers. She wanted to build bridges between worlds. Instead, she translated corporate emails, shipping contracts, wine import regulations, documents filled with numbers and deadlines and dry legal words. She did that freelance at night when she had the energy, which was rare. After Cafe Verona, she had 2 hours to eat something small and change clothes before heading to her second job. At 5 p.m., Adriana stepped into Osteria Fiora. The restaurant looked like a postcard from southern Italy. Red brick walls, candlelight and old wine bottles, framed black and white photos of unknown ancestors smiling proudly in aprons. It smelled like garlic, basil, and warm bread. Most people found it comforting. Adriana found it bittersweet. It reminded her of what she loved. It also reminded her of what she had not yet become. She tied on her apron, picked up her notepad, and stepped into the dining room with her practiced smile. The dinner rush moved fast. Plates clattered. Wine glasses chimed softly. Customers laughed over pasta and tiramisu. Adriana moved between tables like she was floating. Invisible. She took orders, delivered dishes, refilled water, smiled when someone complimented the food, apologized when someone complained. By 8 p.m. her feet ached. By 9 p.m. her lower back burned. By 10 p.m. she felt like a ghost inside her own body. That was when the door opened. The October wind slipped into the restaurant first. Then he walked in. Adriana noticed him immediately, though she pretended not to. Some people carried attention without asking for it. This man did not try to be seen. He simply was. He wore a dark gray suit that fit him perfectly. Not flashy. Not loud. Just expensive in a quiet way. His dark hair was brushed back neatly. A thin gold chain rested against his collarbone where his white shirt was slightly open at the top. He paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room once. The hostess hurried toward him with a softer smile than usual. He didn't need to ask for the VIP table. He simply walked toward it. The corner table near the window was reserved for important guests. For people who tipped well. For people the owner treated carefully. Adriana picked up a wine menu and approached. "Good evening," she said evenly. "Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked up from his phone. His eyes were dark. Not cold. Just observant. "Burlo," he said. "The 2015. It was the most expensive bottle on the menu." Of course it was. Adriana wrote it down without reacting. "Very good." She turned to leave. "And I'll need a few minutes for dinner," he added calmly. She nodded and walked away. But she was aware of him the entire time. She noticed how he sat back in his chair like he belonged there. How he spoke on the phone in Italian with quick, precise sentences. How his tone shifted slightly when discussing business. Something about a delayed shipment. Something about a meeting being moved. Most of the staff did not understand what he was saying. Adriana did. She did not mean to listen. The language simply reached her. She caught words without trying. When she returned with the wine, she poured it carefully. He watched her. "You're Italian?" he said suddenly. She looked up. "My grandparents were," she answered. He tilted his head slightly. "Not just that. Your English carries it. Very small, but it's there. She felt her shoulders tighten. And you understood my call, he continued. I was working, she replied calmly. You were listening. She met his gaze. I don't involve myself in customers' business. A slow smile touched his mouth. Good. The word unsettled her more than anything else he had said. He ordered dinner. Bistecca rare. He ate quietly with focus. No performance. No exaggerated compliments. Just appreciation for the food. When she brought his espresso later, he looked at her again with the same assessing expression. What brings someone with your ear for language to a restaurant job? He asked. The question stung. Rent, she said simply. Bills. He held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded once. When he finished, he paid without fuss. The tip he left was generous but not dramatic. Not flashy. It felt intentional. Fair. Adriana cleared the table after he left. She felt unsettled. Not because he flirted. He hadn't. Not because he was handsome. It was something else. It was the way he had looked at her like she was more than a server. Like he had noticed something she tried hard to hide. As she wiped the table clean, she muttered under her breath in Neapolitan, Capo duro arrogant. Hard-headed arrogant man. The words were soft. Almost swallowed. She thought no one heard. Later, after midnight, Adriana stepped out into the cold Chicago night. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself and waited for the bus. The city lights reflected on wet pavement. Cars passed. Laughter echoed from somewhere down the block. She should not have been thinking about him. But she was. Something about the way he moved. The way he listened. The way he spoke Italian like it was woven into him. She had seen men like him before. Powerful. Confident. Accustomed to control. They usually brought trouble. She stared at the street ahead, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The man at the VIP table was going to become a problem. She did not yet know what kind of problem. But she could feel it. And she was already too tired for complications. 3 days after the night of the Barolo, Adriana's week fell apart. It started with her laptop. She had stayed up late after her shift at Osteria Fiora, finishing a translation for a logistics company that imported olive oil from southern Italy. The document was long, technical, and painfully dull, but she needed the money. She had been working on it for nearly 2 hours when the screen froze. She tapped the keyboard. Nothing. She restarted the computer. When it powered back on, the file was gone. 2 hours of careful work disappeared because she had forgotten to save. Adriana stared at the screen in silence. For a moment she thought she might cry. Instead, she closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and started again. The next morning, she found an envelope slipped under her apartment door. A rent increase notice. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make her stomach drop. She stood in the narrow hallway of her small apartment and read it twice, hoping she had misunderstood. She had not. That afternoon at Café Verona, her manager called her aside near the storage room. We're cutting hours, he said without meeting her eyes. Business has been slow. Adriana nodded. And we're giving some of the shifts to Marco. Marco was the owner's nephew. He had started last week. He was cheerful and inexperienced and always late. Adriana nodded again. She did not argue. She did not ask why her shifts were being cut instead of his. She knew why. By Thursday evening, her exhaustion had turned into something heavier. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just a quiet, sinking feeling that no matter how hard she worked, the ground kept shifting under her feet. When she arrived at Osteria Fiora for her dinner shift, Maria, the hostess, greeted her with a grin. Your admirer is back, Maria whispered dramatically. I don't have an admirer, Adriana replied, tying her apron. Corner table, Maria added. And he asked for you by name. Adriana's hands paused. She didn't know why her heart skipped. It irritated her that it did. She checked her reflection quickly in the small mirror near the staff lockers. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back neatly. She looked tired. She walked into the dining room. He was there. Same corner table. Different suit. Black this time. His jacket was draped over the chair. The gold chain at his throat caught the candlelight again. He looked up as she approached. Good evening, she said professionally. Can I get you something to drink? Burlo again, he replied. And before you leave, I owe you an apology. That caught her off guard. For what? She asked carefully. For being presumptuous the other night. She blinked. I made assumptions about your situation, he continued calmly. That was not my place. She studied his face, searching for sarcasm. There was none. Well, she said slowly, thank you. I don't like being wrong, he added lightly. But I dislike being unfair even more. She gave a small nod and moved to pour the wine. When she returned with the bottle, he gestured toward the empty chair across from him. Sit for a moment. I'm working, she said immediately. I know. I won't take long. She hesitated. The restaurant was still quiet. Only 2 other tables were occupied. Against her better judgment, she sat. My name is Lorenzo DeLuca, he said. She had expected that name to sound familiar, but she did not react. Adriana Valenti, she replied. I know, he said calmly. I asked. She stiffened slightly. I asked the hostess, he clarified. Not in a suspicious way. She folded her hands in her lap. What is this about? She asked. I need a translator. She almost laughed. You have one, she said. She's wearing an apron. I need more than someone who can translate menus or phone calls, he said evenly. I'm opening a cultural institute in River North. A permanent space. Gallery, residency program, educational center. She listened without speaking. It's a partnership between American investors and Italian institutions. Everything needs translation. Contracts, grant proposals, correspondence. Not just word for word. Cultural nuance. His eyes held hers steadily. Someone who understands the difference between dialect and formal language. Someone who can move between both worlds without flattening either one. Adriana's chest tightened slightly. There was no mocking tone in his voice. No condescension. Why me? She asked. Because when I spoke on the phone, you didn't just understand the words. You understood the context. That doesn't mean I'm qualified for something like this. You studied literature, he said. She froze. I'm not stalking you, he added calmly. The restaurant owner mentioned it. He speaks highly of you. Adriana felt exposed. This would be a 6-month project at minimum, Lorenzo continued. Possibly longer. And the pay? She asked carefully. He named a number. Her breath left her quietly. Per month. It was more than she made from both jobs combined. She stared at him, waiting for the catch. There are agencies for this, she said finally. Established firms. I've met with them, he replied. They are efficient. They are also disconnected. I don't want efficiency alone. I want care. Silence stretched between them. Adriana's mind raced. This was exactly what she had dreamed of. The kind of opportunity she used to imagine when she first moved to Chicago. Real translation work. Cultural work. But experience had taught her that good offers often hid sharp edges. I would need to review contracts, she said firmly. Scope of work. Terms. Of course. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a business card on the table. Lorenzo DeLuca. DeLuca Cultural Foundation. River North. Below that, an address. A direct number. Come to my office tomorrow afternoon, he said. 2 o'clock. If you don't like what you see, you walk away. No obligation. She picked up the card. The paper felt heavy. This is legitimate, he added quietly. I'm not trying to trap you. She looked at him carefully. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask. She stood, returning to her role as server. He ordered dinner. She moved through the rest of the shift in a blur. After midnight, on the bus ride home, she took out her phone and searched his name. Lorenzo DeLuca. Several business articles appeared. Mentions of the DeLuca Hospitality Group. Luxury hotels. Restaurants. Development projects. Philanthropic initiatives. Photographs from charity events. His father's name appeared frequently. Vittorio DeLuca. Influential. Respected. Powerful. There were no scandals. No obvious wrongdoing. But there was something in the tone of the articles. A weight. A suggestion of influence that extended beyond what was written plainly. Not criminal. Not innocent either. Just powerful. Adriana leaned her head back against the bus window. Opportunity and risk often wore the same face. When she reached her apartment, she placed the business card on her small kitchen table and stared at it. Her laptop was still open on the counter. Her rent notice still lay unopened beside it. She had been surviving for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to reach for something more. She picked up the card again. River North. 2 o'clock. After a long moment, she set it back down carefully. She would go. Not because he was confident. Not because he was attractive. But because she was tired of running on fumes. And this might be the first real chance she had been offered in years. Adriana almost turned back twice on her way to River North. The train ride felt longer than usual. She kept her bag on her lap, one hand resting over the pocket where Lorenzo's business card sat. It felt heavier than paper should. She had dressed carefully but simply. Black trousers. A soft cream blouse. No apron. No cafe uniform. No restaurant name stitched above her heart. She told herself this was just a meeting. Nothing more. The address led her to a converted warehouse building near the river. It was modern but not cold. The kind of place that used to hold machinery and now held ideas. She stood outside for a moment, breathing in the crisp Chicago air, then pushed open the glass door. Inside, sunlight flooded the space. Not artificial office lighting. Not dim restaurant glow. Real light. The lobby was quiet. Clean lines. Concrete floors softened by rugs. A small brass plaque near the elevator read, DeLuca Cultural Foundation. Her pulse quickened. When the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, she stepped into a space that stopped her in place. It was not corporate. It was alive. Exposed brick walls stretched upward toward high ceilings lined with steel beams. Massive windows faced the river, pouring golden light across the wooden floors. Art hung everywhere. Contemporary paintings. Framed sketches. Sculptures resting on pedestals. In one corner, long work tables were covered with what looked like fragments of antique frames and ceramics. Tools lay neatly arranged beside them, as if someone had been carefully restoring something fragile and meaningful. It did not feel like a businessman's office. It felt like a studio. Adriana. She turned. Lorenzo stood near a large wooden table at the center of the room. No suit jacket this time. Dark jeans. White shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. The gold chain still rested at his throat. He looked less formal. More real. "Thank you for coming," he said. She nodded. "I said I would." He gestured toward a professional espresso machine on a side counter. "Coffee?" Her lips curved slightly despite her nerves. "Yes, please." He moved toward the machine with practiced ease. The sound of grinding beans filled the quiet room. The scent followed, rich and warm. She watched his hands. Steady. Confident. Familiar with the ritual. "You make it yourself?" she asked. "Some things shouldn't be delegated," he replied. "Espresso is one of them." She did not argue. He handed her a small porcelain cup, not paper, not disposable. She took a careful sip. It was perfect. They sat across from each other at the large wooden table. Thick folders lay spread between them. "Everything is here," Lorenzo said calmly. "Scope of work. Timeline. Payment structure. Termination clauses. Intellectual property rights." She opened the first folder. The documents were detailed. Professional. Clear. There were no hidden conditions tucked between lines. No vague promises. No sudden demands. She read slowly, carefully. He did not rush her. The project was outlined clearly. A cultural center in River North dedicated to showcasing Italian art, literature, and craft traditions while fostering dialogue with American artists and scholars. Exhibitions. Residency programs. Workshops. Partnerships with institutions in Italy. Every major document required bilingual precision. Not just translation. Interpretation. She finished reviewing the final contract and looked up. "This is legitimate," she said quietly. "I told you it was." She studied him. "Why this?" she asked. "You already have successful businesses. Hotels. Restaurants." He leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "My family built its name in hospitality," he said. "Providing comfort. Luxury. Experience. That sounds successful." "It is." He paused. "But success is not the same as meaning." The sunlight caught his profile as he continued. "My grandparents came from Naples with very little. They carried recipes, stories, traditions. That was their wealth. My father turned that into an empire. And you want something different?" "I want something lasting," he said simply. "I don't want our heritage to become a theme or a brand. I don't want culture turned into decoration." His voice grew steadier. "I want to honor it without selling it." Adriana felt something inside her shift. "That's complicated," she said. "Yes." "It requires care." "Yes." "And you believe I can provide that?" "I believe you already do," he replied. Silence stretched between them. She thought about her 2 jobs. The rent increase. The lost file on her laptop. She thought about the poetry she had once translated just for herself. "When would I start?" she asked quietly. His expression softened. "Monday." She nodded once. "I accept." He did not smile widely. He simply inclined his head as if acknowledging a partnership rather than winning a deal. Good. He stood and walked around the table, stopping a few feet from her. There is one more thing. She raised an eyebrow. The other night at the restaurant, he said evenly. You said something under your breath. Her stomach tightened. I don't know what you mean. You do, he said calmly. You thought I didn't hear. Heat crept into her face. It was unprofessional, she said. What did you say? She looked toward the window. He took one step closer. Say it again, he said. But this time look at me. The request was not aggressive. It was deliberate. She understood what he was asking. Not for the words. For the courage. Adriana lifted her chin and met his eyes directly. Capo duro arrogant, she said clearly. Hard-headed arrogant man. For a moment nothing moved. Then the corner of his mouth lifted slowly. Good, he said softly. She blinked. I don't want you shrinking yourself, he continued. Not here. I wasn't shrinking. You apologized for it. She held his gaze. I won't apologize now. Don't, he replied. There was no mockery in his voice. No wounded pride. Only respect. Something unspoken passed between them in that quiet room flooded with light. Not flirtation. Not yet. Recognition. He stepped back, giving her space again. Your position is professional, he said evenly. You are here because of your skill. Nothing else. I expect that to remain true, she replied. It will. She believed him. That surprised her more than anything else. He handed her a key card to the building. You'll have full access, he said. If you disagree with me about anything in these documents, I expect you to say so. She allowed herself a small smile. I will. I know. They stood there for a moment, neither moving. Adriana glanced once more around the office. The restoration tables. The art. The light. For the first time in years she felt something close to hope. Not wild hope. Not reckless fantasy. But steady, grounded possibility. When she finally turned to leave, Lorenzo spoke again. I'm glad you came. She paused at the door. So am I, she said honestly. As she stepped back into the hallway, the sunlight followed her out. And though nothing dramatic had happened, something had shifted. She had walked into that office as a tired woman juggling two jobs. She walked out as something else. Not rescued. Not saved. Chosen. And choosing back. Adriana submitted her resignation letters the next morning. At Café Verona, her manager barely looked up from the register when she handed him the envelope. You found something better? He asked. Yes. He nodded. Good for you. That was it. No attempt to persuade her to stay. No surprise. She had been reliable but replaceable. At Osteria Fiora, Maria hugged her tightly. I knew you weren't meant to carry plates forever, Maria said, eyes shining. Adriana smiled, though her chest felt tight. She had spent years surviving inside those walls. Leaving felt like stepping into thin air. By Monday, she stood once again in the River North loft, this time not as a guest but as part of the foundation. Her name was already printed on a small brass plate near one of the desks. Adriana Valenti. Cultural Translation and Development. The sight of it made her pause. She ran her fingers lightly over the letters. This was real. The first week passed in a blur of documents. Contracts between Italian institutions and American partners. Letters from curators in Milan. Draft proposals for educational programming. Legal agreements for artist residencies. The language was layered, formal, filled with phrases that did not survive literal translation. Adriana sat at her desk near the window, sunlight falling across her laptop, and worked with careful precision. She did not simply translate sentences. She studied intention. She adjusted tone. She reshaped paragraphs so they carried the same weight in English that they held in Italian. Some mornings, she and Lorenzo sat across from each other at the large wooden table, pages spread between them. This section sounds like a financial pitch, she said one afternoon, tapping a paragraph in the proposal draft. But the Italian version speaks about cultural responsibility. He leaned closer to read. You're right, he admitted after a moment. It shifts. It feels like you're saying one thing to investors and another to the institutions. He looked up at her, not defensive. So what do we say? It surprised her every time. He did not argue. He asked. We say the same thing to both, she replied. That the center exists to connect past and present. Not preserve culture like it's frozen, but allow it to grow. He studied her face, not the document. Rewrite it, he said quietly. She did. Word by word. line by line. She began to see the foundation not just as a business venture, but as a living idea taking shape. The mission statement evolved under her hands. It became clearer, stronger, more honest. It was not about nostalgia. It was about dialogue. One evening, after most of the staff had left, she remained at her desk revising a grant narrative. Lorenzo was sketching layout ideas for the gallery walls on a large sheet of paper nearby. "Come here," he called gently. She walked over. "What do you see?" he asked, pointing at the sketch. "A linear path," she answered. "It feels like you're guiding visitors through a timeline." "That's the idea." "It might be too controlled," she said carefully. "What if you allow them to move freely? Let the space feel like discovery instead of instruction." He paused. Then he erased part of the drawing. "You challenged me," he said lightly. "You asked for that." He smiled. He valued her voice. That realization settled slowly but firmly inside her. It was not performative. He did not simply nod and ignore her later. He incorporated her suggestions, adjusted plans, rewrote drafts. She had never experienced that kind of professional respect before. The days developed a rhythm. She arrived early. He was usually already there. Sometimes he was making espresso. He learned quickly that she preferred a small amount of sugar, nothing more. She learned that he took his black. Without speaking about it, they began placing cups on each other's desks. On Wednesdays, he brought pastries from a Neapolitan bakery on the west side of the city. Sfogliatelle. Almond biscuits. Small, delicate things wrapped carefully in white paper. "You don't have to do that," she said once. "I know." He did not elaborate. She stopped arguing. The work intensified as deadlines approached. The European Cultural Council required detailed documentation. Italian partners requested revisions. American donors asked for clarity. Adriana felt stretched but not drained. This exhaustion was different. It came from focus, not survival. There were moments when she forgot the world outside the loft existed. She would look up from a page and find Lorenzo watching her with a thoughtful expression. "Is something wrong?" she asked once. "No," he replied. "You think before you speak. It's rare." She turned back to her screen, but heat rose in her cheeks. The attraction between them was subtle at first. It lived in proximity. In the way they stood slightly too close while reviewing documents. In the quiet awareness of each other's presence. In the way his voice softened when he said her name. They maintained professionalism. They never crossed lines during meetings. They did not touch. But something invisible shifted. One evening, as rain streaked down the tall windows, they debated a phrase in a residency agreement. "It's not just about hosting artists," Adriana said. "It's about exchange. If you translate it as hosting, it sounds temporary. You want something deeper. What word would you use?" "Partnership." He looked at her carefully. "That's stronger." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then use it." She typed the word. The silence that followed felt charged. Not uncomfortable. Just aware. As the weeks passed, professional boundaries began to blur at the edges. They stayed later. They ordered takeout when they forgot to leave for dinner. They argued about poetry and funding models with equal intensity. She saw his frustration when negotiations stalled. He saw her fierce concentration when deadlines loomed. One afternoon she caught him staring at her again. "What?" she asked. "You care?" he said simply. "Of course I care. You don't have to." "Yes, I do," she replied quietly. "If I'm putting my name on this work, it matters." Something changed in his expression then. Not admiration alone. Recognition. He stood and walked to the window. "I built hotels for years," he said calmly. "I knew how to make money. I knew how to grow numbers. And this is different?" "Yes." She joined him by the glass, the city stretching below them. "This feels like building something that might outlast me." She looked at him. "And you're afraid it won't?" He did not answer immediately. "I'm afraid I won't do it justice." She understood that fear. "You won't," she said honestly. "Not alone." He turned toward her slowly. "Good thing I'm not alone." Their eyes held for a second longer than necessary. Adriana stepped back first. They returned to their desks. The line between partnership and something else had not been crossed. But it was visible now. Not in grand gestures. Not in dramatic declarations. In quiet choices. In shared vision. In the way they made each other sharper, clearer, braver. By the end of the month, the foundation's identity felt solid. The mission statement was precise. The programming structure strong. The language honest. Adriana sometimes caught herself smiling at her screen. She was no longer translating shipping contracts late at night. She was shaping something meaningful. And somewhere between mission revisions and espresso rituals, she began to realize that the project was not the only thing taking form inside that office of light. Something else was growing too. Slowly. Carefully. And neither of them had decided what to do about it yet. The preview event at the DeLuca Grand Hotel felt like a test. Not just for the Foundation. For them. Adriana arrived early, stepping through the revolving doors into the marble lobby of the hotel. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. Soft music floated through the air. Staff moved with quiet efficiency, adjusting floral arrangements and polishing glass surfaces until they shone. She paused near the entrance, smoothing her dress. It was black. Simple, elegant, and bolder than anything she usually wore. The fabric fit cleanly against her frame without being loud. Her dark hair fell loose over her shoulders for once. She had taken extra care with her makeup, not dramatic, just enough to feel deliberate. She was not a server tonight. She was part of the Foundation. Lorenzo stood near the center of the ballroom, speaking with two men in tailored suits. When he turned and saw her, he stopped mid-sentence. For a brief moment he simply looked. Not in surprise. In appreciation. He excused himself and crossed the room toward her. "You look," he paused, searching for the right word. "Remarkable." "Thank you," she replied, keeping her voice steady. He wore a formal black suit that fit him perfectly. The crisp white shirt beneath it contrasted sharply with his dark hair. The gold chain at his throat caught the light again, subtle but unmistakable. "You ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded. The ballroom gradually filled with guests. Italian cultural representatives. Chicago donors. Artists. Critics. Business partners. Adriana moved easily between languages. She translated introductions, clarified cultural references, softened misunderstandings before they could form. Her voice carried calm authority. She did not rush. She did not stumble. Lorenzo watched her often. On stage, during the formal presentation, he spoke first in English, outlining the Foundation's purpose and the upcoming cultural center in River North. His tone was confident but not boastful. Then he switched to Italian. Flawlessly. He addressed the visiting representatives with respect and precision. He spoke about heritage, responsibility, dialogue between cultures. He acknowledged concerns about authenticity without dismissing them. Adriana stood slightly behind him, translating questions from the audience, filling small gaps when needed. She realized something as she watched him. He was not performing. He believed every word. After the presentation, conversations broke out across the room. The atmosphere shifted from formal to energized. Laughter rose near the bar. Clusters of guests debated ideas and potential collaborations. At one point, a representative from Naples asked a complex question in rapid dialect. Lorenzo answered without hesitation, matching tone and rhythm. The exchange ended with nods of approval. "You didn't need me for that," Adriana murmured when they stood side by side again. "I did," he replied softly. "Just not for the words." She glanced at him but did not ask what he meant. As the evening progressed, the tension between them deepened quietly. Not obvious to others. But present. When most of the guests had moved toward the dining area, Lorenzo leaned close. "Come upstairs," he said. She followed him through a side corridor and into a private elevator. The doors opened onto the rooftop terrace. The night air was cool. The Chicago skyline stretched in every direction, lights glittering against the dark sky. The river reflected silver below. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Adriana stepped toward the railing, letting the breeze cool her skin. "It went well," she said finally. "It did," he agreed. Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt heavier. He moved to stand beside her. "I need to say something," he began. Her heart quickened. "You don't have to," she said carefully. "Yes, I do." She turned to face him. His expression was not casual now. Not controlled. Something vulnerable flickered beneath his composure. "These last weeks," he said quietly, "have been the most focused I've ever felt about anything." "That's good," she replied, trying to keep the conversation grounded in professionalism. "It's not just the work," he said. She felt the shift before he finished the sentence. "I look forward to coming to the office," he continued. "But not only because of deadlines or contracts." He paused as if measuring his next words. "I look forward to seeing you." The city noise below felt distant. "You challenge me," he went on. "You question me. You refuse to let me take the easy answer." You make the project better. You make me better. Adriana's breath felt shallow. This is complicated, she said softly. I know. You're my employer. I don't want to be, he said gently. Not in the way that matters here. She held his gaze. I didn't plan this, he continued. And I don't expect anything from you because of the position you hold. Your work stands on its own. Her thoughts tangled. I'm not saying this to create pressure, he added. I'm saying it because pretending otherwise has become impossible. The wind lifted a strand of her hair. And what exactly are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I think about you when I shouldn't, he answered honestly. I notice when you're tired. I remember how you take your espresso. I wait for your opinion before I finalize decisions. His voice softened. I don't just value you professionally. Her chest tightened. I don't know what this means, she admitted. Neither do I, he replied. But I know I don't want to ignore it. The honesty in his tone disarmed her. She had spent years guarding herself, protecting her independence, refusing to let admiration or charm sway her. But this was not charm. It was clarity. I look forward to seeing you too, she said quietly. He did not move closer yet. You do? He asked. Yes. She exhaled slowly. I stay later than I need to, she admitted. I rewrite drafts that are already finished. I think about conversations after I leave. A faint smile touched his mouth. So what do we do? She asked. We could ignore it, he said. Return to pure professionalism. She raised an eyebrow. Or, he continued, we could acknowledge that something is happening and proceed carefully. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Carefully, she repeated. He nodded. The space between them felt charged now. He lifted his hand slowly, not touching her yet. If this makes you uncomfortable, tell me now, he said. She did not step back. Instead, she closed the distance herself. She kissed him. It was not rushed. Not desperate. Just honest. For a heartbeat he seemed surprised. Then his hands settled gently at her waist. The kiss deepened, steady and certain. The skyline blurred behind closed eyes. When they finally separated, the air felt different. Alive. This changes things, she said softly. Yes, he agreed. Are you sure? He held her gaze firmly. I don't want to look back later and wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent. She nodded. Neither do I. He brushed his thumb lightly against her cheek, then let his hand fall. We'll handle this carefully, he said. The work remains professional. It does, she agreed. But they both knew something new had begun. The city stretched out around them, vast and bright. The cultural center had not yet opened. The foundation still had hurdles ahead. But on that rooftop, under the open sky, a different foundation had been laid. Not built from contracts or funding. From courage. And neither of them intended to pretend it had not happened. After the rooftop, nothing looked different. And yet everything did. In the office, Adriana and Lorenzo kept their distance. They spoke the same way they always had. Professional. Focused. Calm. They held meetings. Reviewed contracts. Answered calls. They did not touch. They did not speak in a softer tone. If anyone noticed the shift, they did not show it. But after work hours, the rules changed. It started small. Lorenzo would ask, "Are you leaving now?" as if it was casual. Adriana would glance at the clock and say, "In a few minutes," as if she had not been counting those minutes already. Sometimes they stayed to finish a document. Sometimes they stayed because it felt easier than going home to separate apartments and pretending they were not thinking about each other. When the building emptied, the quiet became theirs. The big windows looked out over the river. Street lights reflected on the water. The office felt warmer at night, less like a workplace and more like a private space filled with ideas and unfinished thoughts. One night, Adriana was revising a long Italian grant report when her stomach growled loudly. She froze, embarrassed. Lorenzo looked up from his desk and smiled slightly. "You haven't eaten?" he said. "I had a sandwich earlier," she lied. He stood without argument, picked up his phone and ordered takeout. When it arrived, he set the bags on the large wooden table like it was the most normal thing in the world. Pizza. Salad. A box of small pastries. They ate sitting across from each other, surrounded by papers. Adriana tried to keep the conversation on work, but Lorenzo kept drifting into other topics. "What did you want to do before Chicago?" he asked suddenly. She swallowed a bite of pizza. "Translate poetry," she said. "I know. But what kind?" "Neapolitan poets," she replied. "Old and new. The kind people don't read in English because they think it won't carry over." "And you think it can?" It can, she said firmly. If the translator understands the feeling, not just the words. He watched her closely. You talk about language like it's alive, he said. It is, she replied. If you do it right. He nodded slowly as if storing that truth somewhere inside him. They began to debate more often after that. Not fighting. Debating. About how to describe the cultural center's purpose. About whether tradition should be protected or challenged. About what makes something authentic. About whether Italian culture in America was preservation or reinvention. Adriana would argue with her hands, leaning forward, voice sharp with passion. Lorenzo would counter calmly, then smile when she pushed back. You enjoy disagreeing with me, she accused one evening. I enjoy you, he replied. It was said lightly, but it landed heavily. The boundaries blurred in quiet moments. When she finished a difficult translation, he would come stand behind her chair and read over her shoulder. His presence close, warm, steady. He did not touch her, but she felt him anyway. When he grew frustrated during a phone call, she watched him pace near the window, jaw tight, shoulders tense. Afterwards she would say, "You're carrying too much," and he would pause as if he had not expected anyone to notice. Late nights became a routine. They ordered food. They worked. They talked. Sometimes they talked until the work stopped being the reason they stayed. And in those hours, Adriana began to see Lorenzo differently. Not as a powerful man in tailored suits. Not as the confident face of a foundation. But as a person. He laughed more after hours. Quiet, genuine laughter that softened his entire expression. He made dry comments about donors and social politics. He teased her gently when she corrected his word choice. One night, she caught him staring at an old photograph frame on one of the restoration tables. His gaze was distant. "What is that?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then picked up the frame carefully. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said. "She brought it from Naples." "What's inside?" "A picture of her parents," he replied. "Back when everything was simple." Adriana studied his face. "You miss them," she said. "I miss what they represented," he answered quietly. A time when the family name meant survival, not pressure. That was the first time he said the word pressure out loud. After that, the truth began to spill in pieces. It happened late, close to midnight, when they had finished revising a major document and were sitting with coffee cups and tired eyes. Lorenzo leaned back on the couch near the window. Adriana sat on the other end, legs tucked beneath her. The city hummed below like distant music. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "My father thinks this is a waste," he said suddenly. Adriana turned her head. "What?" "This," he repeated. "The foundation. The cultural center. All of it. But it's your family foundation." "It was," he said. "Now it's mine. And he hates that." His voice was calm, but Adriana could hear the strain underneath. "He wanted me to stay focused on the hotels," Lorenzo continued. "On expansion. On profit margins. On everything measurable. And you don't want that." "I did for years," he admitted. "Because I wanted his approval." Adriana stayed silent. Lorenzo's eyes remained fixed on the ceiling. "I grew up watching him build everything," he said quietly. "I watched him turn small beginnings into power. People respect him. People fear him. He walks into a room and everything shifts." Adriana thought of the way Lorenzo himself walked into rooms. "Then I took over parts of the business," Lorenzo continued. "I worked harder than anyone. I did what he asked. I fixed problems. I built stronger systems. I thought if I proved myself he would finally see me." He stopped for a moment, swallowing. But it was never enough. Adriana's chest tightened. "He calls," Lorenzo said. "All the time. He asks questions. He checks on decisions. He reminds me what it means to be a DeLuca." "And what does it mean?" Adriana asked quietly. Lorenzo's mouth tightened. "It means control," he said. "It means winning. It means never appearing weak." He turned his head to look at her. "And I'm tired." The admission made Adriana go still. He looked exhausted in that moment. Not physically. Emotionally. Like a man holding a heavy weight in his chest for years. Adriana shifted slightly closer. "That's why this matters to you," she said softly. "Because it's yours." He nodded. "It's the first thing I've built that feels like it belongs to me," he admitted. "Not to him." Adriana watched him closely. "And you're afraid he'll take it away," she said. His eyes flickered. "Yes," he whispered. She reached out slowly and rested her hand on his forearm. He did not flinch. He looked down at her hand like it was something precious. I'm not used to someone touching me like that, he said quietly. How are you used to being touched? Adriana asked. With expectations, he answered. The honesty hit her hard. She understood in that moment that his confidence was not simple arrogance. It was armor. It was habit. It was survival inside his world. And under it there was softness. A tenderness he hid from everyone. Adriana's thumb moved gently across his forearm. You don't have to be perfect with me, she said. Lorenzo's throat worked as he swallowed. I don't know how to be anything else, he admitted. Then learn, she said simply. With me. He sat up slowly. Their faces were closer now. I don't want to ruin this, he whispered. You won't, she replied. He looked at her with a seriousness that made her breath catch. And in that quiet office after midnight, surrounded by coffee cups and papers and the city's distant lights, they fell into something deeper than attraction. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Slowly. With truth. With trust. With the understanding that they were both carrying heavy things, and for the first time they were not carrying them alone. Saturday afternoons were usually quieter. Adriana liked them because the building felt calm. Fewer calls. No scheduled meetings. No visitors arriving with demands and polished smiles. It was the kind of time she could work without interruption, moving slowly through difficult sections of translation, checking references, refining meaning. That Saturday she arrived just after noon with her laptop and a folder of notes. The sky was pale, the river outside the windows moving like dull silver. She made herself espresso, added a small pinch of sugar and sat down at her desk. She had barely begun when she heard the elevator bell. She looked up. Voices came next. One voice was Lorenzo's, low and controlled. The other was unfamiliar at first, older, sharper, faster, carrying authority like it was part of the air. Adriana's fingers stopped on the keyboard. The voices were coming from Lorenzo's private office. The door was not fully closed. She could hear enough to understand. The older man spoke in Italian, quick and hard like a knife being sharpened. This is exactly what I mean, the man snapped. You're wasting time and resources. You have real problems and you're here playing curator. Adriana's stomach tightened. Lorenzo answered, also in Italian, slower but tense. This is not play. This is work. It's a hobby, the older man cut in. A rich man's hobby. Vanity dressed up as culture. Adriana's chest tightened again. She told herself she should stand and leave. Give them privacy. Pretend she hadn't heard anything. But she didn't move. The words pinned her in place. You're neglecting the hotel group, the older man continued. The downtown property needs attention. The restaurant division is slipping. I've been calling you and you're always busy with this. With something that matters, Lorenzo replied. The air in the office seemed to shift. Matters? The older man scoffed. Do you know what matters? Reputation. Growth. Stability. People respect the DeLuca name because we built something solid. Not because we hang paintings and talk about poetry. Lorenzo's voice sharpened. Maybe that's the problem, he said. Maybe we built something solid but empty. A short silence followed. Adriana held her breath. Then the older man spoke again, colder. You sound naive. Lorenzo answered quietly but firmly. I sound like someone who is tired of living a life someone else chose for him. The door opened. Adriana's heart jumped. A man stepped into view. He was tall, older than Lorenzo by decades, dressed in a suit that looked perfectly cut and expensive in a way that did not seek attention. His hair was silver at the sides. His face was composed, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. He looked like a man who had never walked into a room without expecting the room to adjust itself around him. He glanced toward Adriana. His gaze paused on her as if she were a new object placed in the middle of a table. Lorenzo stepped out behind him, jaw tight, shoulders tense. Adriana, Lorenzo said, voice controlled, this is my father, Vittorio DeLuca. Vittorio's eyes did not soften. So, Vittorio said in English, his accent slight but clear, you're here. Adriana stood immediately, pushing her chair back. She felt the urge to shrink under his gaze. She pushed that urge down. Yes, she said evenly. I was working. Vittorio's eyes moved over her once. Her blouse, her posture, the papers on her desk. Not in a rude way. In a measuring way. And what exactly do you do here? He asked. Lorenzo spoke before she could answer. She's my partner on the Cultural Center project. The word partner hung in the air like a shield. Vittorio's expression shifted, almost amused. Partner? He repeated slowly. Interesting. He turned his gaze back to Adriana. Translation? he asked, the word sounding like a test. Yes, Adriana replied. Translation, correspondence, cultural context. Anything that requires clarity between Italian institutions and American partners. Vittorio's eyes narrowed slightly as if weighing her confidence. And you believe you're capable of that? I know I am, Adriana said. Lorenzo's attention snapped toward her, surprise flickering across his face. Vittorio looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out his hand, grip firm and cool when she shook it. Valenti, he said, repeating her surname as if searching his memory. Italian. My family is from Naples, Adriana replied calmly. Of course, Vittorio said, though his tone suggested the words meant nothing to him beyond category. He released her hand and turned toward Lorenzo. This is what you're doing with your time, Vittorio said sharply. Hiring young women with degrees and calling them partners while the business bleeds in other places. Stop, Lorenzo said, voice suddenly harsher. Vittorio's eyes flashed. You want me to stop? He asked. I built everything you have. Every door that opens for you opens because I made it open. And I'm grateful, Lorenzo said tightly. But gratitude doesn't mean surrender. Vittorio's jaw tightened. You think this art project will give you purpose, he said. You think you can escape responsibility by hiding behind culture. It's not hiding, Lorenzo replied. It is, Vittorio insisted. Because it doesn't generate power. Lorenzo's hands curled into fists at his sides. Adriana watched him carefully. There was anger in him, yes. But there was also something else. A deep, old tension. The kind built over years of trying and failing to win approval that never arrived. Vittorio turned back to Adriana again. She believes in this, Vittorio said to Lorenzo, as if Adriana wasn't in the room. Of course she does. She benefits. This is a comfortable position for someone like her. Adriana felt heat rise in her chest. She forced herself to speak calmly. Your son didn't hire me out of charity, she said. He hired me because I do the work properly. Vittorio studied her again. And you think the work will last, he said. It already matters, Adriana replied. People are responding. Institutions are participating. The language is being taken seriously. It's not vanity. It's substance. Vittorio's expression did not soften, but something in his eyes shifted slightly, like a man forced to admit a small inconvenience. He looked at Lorenzo once more. We'll talk Monday, Vittorio said. About the downtown property. And the restaurant division. Don't ignore my calls. Lorenzo's face remained stiff. I won't, he said. Vittorio adjusted his cuff as if the argument had been nothing more than a mild interruption. Then he walked away toward the elevator. Before the doors closed, he glanced back once. Not at Lorenzo. At Adriana. A final cold assessment. Then he was gone. The quiet that followed felt heavier than the argument. Adriana stood still, her heart pounding. Lorenzo remained near the doorway of his office, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the empty hallway as if he could still see his father's shadow. I'm sorry, he said finally, voice lower. Adriana exhaled slowly. That was your father, she said. I can handle it. He shouldn't have spoken to you like that, Lorenzo said. He speaks to everyone like that, Adriana replied. Lorenzo's shoulders dropped slightly, like the fight had drained him. He thinks I'm wasting time, Lorenzo said quietly. He thinks this project is foolish. And what do you think? Adriana asked. Lorenzo looked at her. His eyes were conflicted, tired. I think, he paused. I think I'm tired of being treated like a child who needs permission. Adriana stepped closer, not touching him yet. You're building something that matters, she said firmly. Don't let him make you doubt it just because he can't measure it in profit. Lorenzo let out a breath that sounded almost like defeat. He built his life on control, Adriana continued. And he expects you to continue the same pattern. But you're not him. Lorenzo's eyes flickered. And you don't have to spend your whole life trying to earn approval you may never get, she added. The words landed. Lorenzo swallowed, his gaze dropping for a moment. Then he looked up again and something steadier appeared in his expression. You're right, he said quietly. Adriana nodded. Build what you want to build, she said. If he adjusts, he adjusts. If he doesn't, then he doesn't. But don't betray yourself just to keep peace. Lorenzo's mouth curved into a small, strained smile. When did you become so fearless? He asked. I'm not fearless, Adriana replied. I'm just tired of watching people shrink. His gaze softened. Thank you, he said. Adriana stepped back toward her desk. Now, she said, forcing her tone to lighten, Are we going to keep working or are we going to let him ruin the whole afternoon? Lorenzo's quiet laugh escaped him. Work, he said. Definitely work. And though the tension remained, something else remained too. A choice. A clear one. To build what mattered even when the people who mattered most did not approve. The email arrived at 10:17 on a Tuesday morning. Adriana was reviewing the final language on an educational outreach document when she heard Lorenzo's sharp intake of breath from across the office. She looked up. He was staring at his screen. What? She asked, heart jumping. He did not answer immediately. His eyes moved quickly as he read. Then he stood. We got it, he said quietly. She blinked. Got what? The grant. He turned his laptop toward her. European Cultural Council, official funding approval. For a second, Adriana could not process the words. She stood slowly and walked to his desk. She read the message herself, line by line. Approved. Full funding. Multi-year support. Her chest tightened. They had spent months refining those documents. Every phrase, every nuance, every explanation of cultural responsibility had been weighed carefully. And now it was real. Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair, something he only did when he was overwhelmed. They approved the programming, he said softly. All of it. Adriana felt her throat close unexpectedly. You did it, she whispered. He shook his head. We did. He moved toward the small cabinet near the espresso machine and pulled out a bottle of champagne. She hadn't even known it was there. You were prepared, she said faintly. I was hopeful, he corrected. He popped the cork, the sharp sound echoing through the loft. The champagne fizzed as he poured 2 glasses. They stood near the large window overlooking the river, glasses in hand. To courage, Lorenzo said quietly. To stubbornness, Adriana replied. He smiled. They clinked glasses. The champagne was crisp, light, almost unreal against the weight of the moment. For a while they just stood there, letting the truth settle in. The foundation would survive. The cultural center would open with real support behind it. The work mattered. Lorenzo set his glass down on the table. He was quieter than usual. Are you okay? Adriana asked. He looked at her, and for once, the usual control in his expression was gone. I didn't realize how much I needed this, he admitted. Needed the funding? No, his voice dropped. Needed proof. She understood. Proof that he wasn't foolish. Proof that he wasn't chasing vanity. Proof that this was more than rebellion against his father. He stepped closer to her. If you hadn't rewritten those sections, he said quietly, they would have rejected it. That's not true. It is, he insisted. You clarified the purpose. You made it real. Adriana swallowed. I just translated. You never just translate, he said. The way he said it made her pulse quicken. The office felt smaller suddenly. The distance between them vanished without either of them deciding to move. Lorenzo's voice softened. These months, he began, then paused as if choosing his words carefully. Working with you has been the most honest part of my life. Adriana's breath slowed. Before this, he continued, everything was strategy, calculation, approval. He looked at her with something almost fragile in his eyes. With you it's different. Her heart began to race. Different how? She asked quietly. I don't pretend, he said. I don't measure my words. I don't calculate outcomes. He stepped closer still. I wake up looking forward to seeing you. Her throat tightened. Not because of deadlines, he added. Not because of funding. His voice was steady now, even if his eyes betrayed nerves. Because of you. The air between them shifted. Adriana felt the familiar instinct rise inside her, the one that told her to slow down, to guard herself, to analyze instead of feel. This is fast, she said softly. I know. And complicated. Yes. He did not deny it. He did not rush her. He just stood there waiting. I didn't expect to feel this, he admitted. But I do. Her pulse thudded in her ears. I love you, he said. The words were simple, clear, not dramatic. But they landed heavily. Adriana stared at him. She had heard those words before in her life. From people who meant them lightly. From people who confused intensity with permanence. This felt different. It was not loud. It was steady. Her first instinct was hesitation. Love meant risk. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant stepping forward without knowing if the ground would hold. But she remembered something she had promised herself when she walked into this building for the first time. She would not shrink. She would not hide from possibility just because she was afraid. I was trying not to, she admitted quietly. Trying not to what? Feel it. Lorenzo's expression softened. You don't have to be careful with me, he said. I do, she replied. But not because I don't care. He searched her face. She stepped closer. I love you too, she said. The words felt terrifying and freeing at the same time. Lorenzo let out a breath he had clearly been holding. He cupped her face gently as if afraid she might disappear. When he kissed her, it was not rushed. It was deliberate. The champagne, the sunlight, the months of tension and shared work all dissolved into that single moment. His hand slid to her waist, steady and warm. She felt grounded and weightless all at once. They did not rush. They did not stumble. They moved toward each other as if they had been walking that direction for weeks. Later, when the city lights outside replaced the daylight, they sat together on the couch near the window. The office no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like something private, something claimed. Lorenzo brushed a strand of hair from her face. Move in with me, he said quietly. She blinked. What? I don't want to split my life in half, he said. Work here. Then leave you behind every night. Adriana sat up slightly. That's a big step. I know. And fast. Yes. He did not pretend otherwise. I'm not asking because of the grant, he continued. Or because today feels good. He held her gaze. I'm asking because I want to build a life that feels as honest as this project. Her chest tightened. She thought of her small apartment. The peeling paint. The rent increase notice still taped to her refrigerator. She thought of independence. Of caution. 6 months, she said finally. His eyebrows lifted. I'll move in, she clarified. But I keep my apartment for 6 months. Just in case. Yes. He smiled slightly. Fair. She studied his face. You're sure? She asked. I've never been more sure of anything, he replied. Adriana exhaled slowly. Then yes. He kissed her again, softer this time. Outside, the river reflected the city lights like scattered stars. Inside the office, surrounded by contracts and drafts and proof of something built carefully from words, another kind of agreement had formed. Not written, not signed, but real. The grant approval had secured the future of the cultural center. And in the quiet space that followed celebration, they had secured something even more fragile. Each other. 6 months passed faster than either of them expected. Adriana moved into Lorenzo's River North loft on a gray Sunday afternoon with 2 suitcases, 3 boxes of books, and her espresso machine. She stood in the middle of the living room for a moment after setting everything down. The space felt different from the office. Warmer. Personal. Large windows stretched from floor to ceiling, letting in wide bands of light. Art hung carefully on exposed brick walls. Shelves were lined with architecture books, business journals, and old family photographs. Now her books joined his. Her clothes slid into the closet beside his suits. Her coffee cups replaced some of his perfectly matched sets. It felt strange at first, like stepping into someone else's life and rearranging the furniture. But slowly the space shifted. It became theirs. Living together revealed the small habits that workdays had hidden. Lorenzo left glasses of water on random surfaces. Adriana left stacks of papers in uneven piles. He insisted on folding clothes immediately. She let laundry sit until she felt like dealing with it. They argued about music volume. About thermostat settings. About whether pasta should ever be broken before cooking. The arguments were not explosive. They were sharp, fast, and then softened by laughter. You're impossible, she told him one evening when he reorganized the pantry without telling her. You like impossible, he replied. She did not deny it. The cultural center opened 2 months after she moved in. The final weeks leading to opening day were intense. Deliveries arrived daily. Artwork was unpacked carefully and installed with precision. Labels were printed, adjusted, reprinted. Adriana found herself doing more than translation. She reviewed artist statements, suggested placement changes, helped refine exhibit descriptions so they spoke clearly to both Italian and American audiences. You should take credit, Lorenzo told her once. For what? For shaping this, he replied. She resisted the idea at first. But during the final walkthrough before opening night, she realized how deeply her words had woven themselves into the space. The language on the walls carried her rhythm. The educational guides reflected her clarity. When the doors opened to the public, she stood near the entrance and watched. People came. Students, artists, families, older couples, curious neighbors who had read about the opening in the paper. They moved slowly through the galleries. They read the labels. They stopped to discuss pieces. They asked questions. The space felt alive. The first press review appeared 3 days later. Thoughtful. Respectful. Surprisingly enthusiastic. The article described the center as a rare bridge between tradition and contemporary relevance. It praised the educational programming and the clarity of vision. Adriana read the article twice. Lorenzo pretended to shrug it off, but she saw the relief in his shoulders. Community engagement grew quickly. Workshops filled up. Artist talks drew crowds. Local schools scheduled field trips. Adriana began leading some of the educational sessions herself. At first, she felt uncertain standing in front of a room. But once she began explaining the layers of language behind certain works, once she started discussing how translation shapes meaning, she felt steady. People listened. After one session, an older woman approached her. "You speak like you built this place," the woman said warmly. Adriana hesitated. "I helped," she answered. "You're more than help," the woman replied. "You're part of it." The words lingered. Lorenzo noticed the shift too. "You're not just the translator anymore," he said one evening as they closed the gallery. "What am I?" she asked. "Co-curator," he replied simply. She laughed. "I don't have that title." "You should." The work changed them. They argued over programming choices. Over whether certain exhibitions were too bold or not bold enough. Over budgets and partnerships. But the arguments were constructive. Neither tried to win. They tried to understand. At home they learned each other's rhythms. Adriana needed quiet mornings. Lorenzo preferred to start the day with conversation. They compromised. She learned that he grew restless when he felt out of control. He learned that she withdrew when she felt overwhelmed. They adjusted. They apologized. They grew. Vittorio's presence remained distant at first. He did not attend the opening. But he read the reviews. And he called. The first call was brief. "I saw the article," Vittorio said over speakerphone one evening. "And?" Lorenzo asked carefully. "It's better than I expected," Vittorio replied. That was all. But it was something. Weeks later, Vittorio visited the center without announcement. Adriana saw him first. He stood near the entrance, hands clasped behind his back, observing the flow of visitors. She approached him cautiously. "Mr. DeLuca," she said politely. He nodded. "It's busy," he observed. "Yes," she replied. He walked slowly through the gallery, stopping at several pieces. He read the labels carefully. "These explanations," he said at one point. "They're clear." "Thank you," Adriana replied. "You wrote them?" "I refined them." He studied her briefly. "They hold weight," he said. It was not praise. But it was not dismissal either. Over time, his visits became less tense. He never fully softened. But he stopped calling the project a hobby. At home, Lorenzo spoke less about conflict with his father. He seemed steadier. "You've changed him," Adriana said one night as they washed dishes together. "No," Lorenzo replied. "I've changed." She smiled. "You allowed yourself to." He glanced at her. "You helped." The loft felt fuller now. Not just with furniture and books but with shared routines. Sunday mornings meant strong coffee and quiet reading. Late evenings sometimes meant sitting on the floor surrounded by exhibition plans. The 6-month mark approached. One evening, Adriana stood in the kitchen looking at her phone. "What's wrong?" Lorenzo asked. "My lease," she said. He went still. "It's up," she added. He walked closer. "And?" She met his eyes. "I'm not renewing." Relief flickered across his face. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes." She stepped closer to him. "I don't need a backup plan anymore." He wrapped his arms around her slowly. Living together had not been perfect. It had required patience, compromise, growth. But it had also revealed something stronger than the excitement of new love. It revealed endurance. The cultural center continued to thrive. Adriana's role expanded naturally. Artists sought her opinion. Staff asked for her guidance. Her name began appearing in press mentions alongside Lorenzo's. She no longer felt like someone surviving. She felt like someone building. One evening, as they stood in the gallery after closing, Lorenzo looked around at the space filled with quiet light. "We built this," he said softly. "Yes," Adriana agreed. He looked at her, not the walls. "We're building more than this." She understood. Life together was no longer a risk balanced by caution. It was a decision renewed daily. They were not finished adjusting. They were not done learning. But the foundation beneath them felt solid. Not inherited. Not imposed. Chosen. The exhibition was titled Threads of Legacy. It had taken nearly a year of planning. Italian textile artists collaborated with American installation designers. Traditional weaving techniques met modern sculptural forms. Old family patterns were reinterpreted through contemporary materials. Fabric hung from ceilings like suspended history. Walls displayed photographs of hands at work, young and old, scarred and delicate. The gallery felt transformed. On opening night, the space was full long before the official program began. Conversations layered over one another in English and Italian. The air carried a mix of perfume, polished wood, and anticipation. Adriana stood near the central installation, adjusting a final placard. She wore a deep burgundy dress that moved lightly when she walked. Her hair was pinned back this time, exposing her face fully. She looked composed, but inside her chest, her heart beat fast. This exhibition was different. It was the first major collaborative project fully shaped by her curatorial voice. Lorenzo moved through the room greeting guests. He looked confident, but she could see the same flicker of nerves in him that had appeared before every major milestone. The gallery lights were warmer than usual, casting soft shadows across layered fabrics. The installation seemed almost alive, shifting slightly as people passed. Adriana stepped back to observe the crowd. Students discussed technique. An older Italian couple pointed to a traditional pattern and spoke quietly in dialect. A group of American designers debated the symbolism of color and texture. It was working. The bridge between cultures was visible in real time. She felt someone approach her side. Impressive, a familiar voice said. She turned. Vittorio De Luca stood beside her. He wore a dark suit, his posture as precise as ever. But his eyes moved slowly across the installation instead of scanning the room for control. "Thank you for coming," Adriana said politely. He nodded. "I wasn't invited," he replied dryly. "You were," she said. "And I came," he answered. They stood in silence for a moment, watching visitors move through the exhibit. "You understand what this is doing?" Vittorio said quietly. Adriana glanced at him. "It's conversation," she replied. "Between generations. Between countries." He studied her. "When I was young," he said slowly, "we didn't have time for conversation. We built what we could as fast as we could. And now," she asked carefully, "now I see what my son is building." The admission was subtle but heavy. He looked across the gallery toward Lorenzo, who was laughing at something a donor had said. "He stands differently," Vittorio observed. Adriana followed his gaze. "He does," she said. "He used to carry everything like it was a test," Vittorio continued. "Now he carries it like it's chosen." Adriana felt her chest tighten. "He chose it," she said gently. Vittorio's eyes shifted back to her. "You changed him," he said. "No," Adriana replied. "He changed himself." Vittorio held her gaze for a long moment. "You gave him permission," he said quietly. The words settled between them. "I was wrong," Vittorio added, almost as if the sentence surprised him. "About this project. About what it could become." Adriana blinked. He did not look away. "And about you," he finished. It was not an apology wrapped in softness. It was direct, measured, but sincere. "Thank you," Adriana said. Vittorio gave a small nod. "I won't pretend I understand everything you've done here," he said. "But I can see that it matters." For Vittorio De Luca, that was as close to praise as it would come. Across the gallery, Lorenzo caught sight of them. His expression shifted quickly, first tension then confusion. Adriana smiled slightly and nodded toward him. Vittorio stepped back. "You should go," he said. "He's looking for you." She moved through the crowd, weaving past guests and installations until she reached Lorenzo. "You survived," she teased softly. "Barely," he replied, though his eyes searched her face. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Better than okay." He looked over her shoulder toward his father. "What did he say?" "He came," she answered. Lorenzo's jaw tightened slightly. And he saw." Lorenzo studied her carefully. Before she could say more, a member of the gallery staff approached. "It's time," the staff member whispered. Lorenzo nodded. He moved toward the center of the room where a small platform had been set for remarks. The crowd quieted slowly as he stepped up. Adriana stood near the front, hands folded lightly in front of her. Lorenzo began speaking in English, thanking the artists, the community partners, the European institutions, and the supporters who had made the exhibition possible. Then he switched to Italian. His voice carried warmth instead of defense. He spoke about legacy not as inheritance, but as something woven through choice. He spoke about threads that connect generations without binding them. Adriana felt her throat tighten. He stepped down from the platform. For a moment she thought the formal program was over. But he did not return to the crowd. He walked straight toward her. The gallery seemed to sense something before she did. Conversations softened. Heads turned. Lorenzo stopped in front of her. His expression was steady. "Adriana," he said, voice clear enough for the nearby crowd to hear. Her heart began pounding. "You helped me build this," he continued. "Not just the exhibitions. Not just the language. But the courage to choose something that mattered." The room grew quieter. She realized what was happening. He reached into his jacket pocket. Time slowed. "I built my life on expectations for a long time," he said. "Now I want to build it on intention." He knelt. The gallery gasped softly. Adriana's breath caught. "Will you marry me?" he asked. The words felt both impossible and inevitable. She looked around the gallery, the installations she had shaped, the artists she had worked with, the visitors who had found meaning in the space. She saw Vittorio watching from across the room. She saw the staff smiling. She saw Lorenzo steady and certain. Full circle. From a tired waitress serving wine to the woman standing in the center of something she had helped create. Her eyes filled with tears. "You're impossible," she whispered. A faint smile touched his mouth. She shook her head gently. "You're still a capo duro arrogant," she added softly, her old words returning with warmth instead of irritation. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, though only he understood the full meaning. She extended her hand. "Yes," she said. Applause erupted. Lorenzo slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into an embrace. The gallery filled with clapping and cheers. Some guests wiped away tears. Others raised glasses in celebration. Across the room, Vittorio's expression did not break into a smile. But he nodded once. Slowly. Approval at last. When the applause faded and conversations resumed with excited energy, Lorenzo leaned close to her. "You never let me forget that, will you?" he murmured. "Never," she replied. They moved through the crowd together, hands intertwined. Not as employer and employee. Not as cautious partners balancing risk. But as equals. As builders of something chosen. Later, when the evening ended and the gallery emptied, they stood alone among the installations. Threads hung softly from the ceiling, catching the last of the light. Adriana looked around one final time. "This was worth it," she said. "Yes," Lorenzo agreed. They walked toward the exit, fingers still linked. Outside, the city lights reflected against the river. Inside, the exhibition stood as proof that legacy was not something handed down untouched. It was something woven. Thread by thread. Choice by choice. And as they stepped into the night together, the path ahead felt not inherited, but created. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.